Good morning, happy campers. Let me try that again. Good morning, happy campers.
Well, good morning and welcome to the 59th ever Sunday Assembly in San Diego. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to start right in today. First of all, I want to let you know we have a media-free zone, so if you do, we are digitally recording this event, so if you do not want to participate in that event, please sit over on this side of the room. Let's kick it off right now with the very wonderful Mr. Paul Svensson.
So our theme today is habits. And I started digging in the dusty corners of my brain, and back in the 80s and early 90s, I was actually a country music songwriter. And my songwriting partner and I threw this little thing together. Just kind of, sometimes you have to keep, exercise your muscles even though you don't think it's gonna go anywhere. But it's called First Good Habit. Well, back when I was young, I used to chew and bite my nails. When I wasn't where I should have been, I'd tell a tale. Got a little older, I go smoke behind the barn. Started saying damn instead of saying darn. I had some crazy habits, it's true. But I walked away from all of them except for you. I quit smoking, drinking, playing poker, hanging out in bars. Chewing, swearing, overeating, driving fancy cars. But no matter what I do, I couldn't think of quitting you. I'm addicted to you, baby, and I sure am sad. And the first good habit that I've ever had. Yes, she is. Well, we go to bed at midnight, but don't fall asleep till dawn. Cause every night's a party and we're sure to carry on. I'm older and I'm wiser, so I'm sticking around for more. But you can take me higher than I've ever been before. I had some crazy habits, it's true. But I walked away from all of them except for you. I quit smoking, drinking, playing poker, hanging out in bars. Chewing, swearing, popping pills, and driving fancy cars. And no matter what you do, I couldn't think of you. I'm addicted to you, baby, and I sure am glad you're the first good habit that I've ever had. Don't need rehabilitation, self-help associations. There's nothing anybody needs to do. It ain't wrong to feel so right. It's a feeling I don't fight, cause there's nothing bad about being hooked on you. I quit smoking, drinking, playing poker, hanging out in bars. Chewing, swearing, popping pills, and driving fancy cars. But no matter what you do, couldn't think of letting you. I'm addicted to you, baby, and I sure am. You're the first good habit that I've ever had. I'm addicted to you, baby, and I sure am glad. You're the first good habit I've ever had. When we had this recorded in Nashville, the guy came in to sing it, went, I don't think I can get all those words in one. So it was actually faster than that. We had to slow it down because nobody could sing it. Anyway, thank you for indulging that. That's just a fun little walk through the past, but I think we ought to sing something else. What do you think? This is a really easy chorus if you don't know it. It goes like this. I don't want to work. I want to bang on the drum all day. Sing that now. I don't want to play. I want to bang on the drum. Do the whole thing now. Here we go. Well, I don't want to work. I want to bang on the drum all day. I don't want to play. I want to bang on the drum all day. Ever since school. She caught me pounding on the desk with my hands, but the licks were so hot it made a teacher wanna dance. And now I don't wanna work, I wanna bang on the drum all day. Hey, why not? I don't wanna play, just wanna bang on the drum all day. Gonna bang it now. I don't wanna work, I wanna bang on the drum all day. I can bang that sucker. I don't wanna play, just wanna bang on the drum all day. Every day when I get home from work, I feel frustrated, my boss is a jerk. I get out my sticks, go out to the shed, and I pound on that drum like it was a boss's head. 'Cause I don't wanna work, I wanna bang on the drum all day. I don't wanna play, I wanna bang on the drum all day. I can bang that drum now. I don't wanna work, hey, 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 I wanna bang. All the hays, hey, 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 hey. I don't wanna play, just wanna bang on the drum all day. This is why I bang the drum. Don't wanna work, come on. I wanna bang on the drum all day. Hey, bang! I don't wanna play, just wanna bang on the drum all day. I can do this all day long. I don't wanna work, I wanna bang on the drum all day. I don't wanna play, just wanna bang on the drum all day.
Thank you, Paul. Wow, that is amazing. You're a really talented fellow, Paul. I'm so glad you're here. Happy wearing of the Green Day for everyone. Whatever reason we do that, I'm not exactly sure, but trees are happy. I do want to let you know that we do have child care, professional child care. We have a professional nanny and a teacher's assistant to watch your children age 1.5 and up. So if nothing else, if you just want a respite from the kids for a couple of hours, please feel free to bring your children here. Well, welcome to Sunday Assembly. Sunday Assembly is a secular, non-religious community that meets monthly to hear great speeches, and we've got a really great one today, to sing silly songs, to share some snacks, but mostly we're here to celebrate this one life that we know that we have. The theme, the motto for Sunday Assembly is live better, help often, and wonder more. And every Sunday Assembly has a theme, and the theme for Sunday Assembly today is habits. My name is Stephen Soden. I'll be your MC today. Let's see, I'm sorry, I'm following a new format here, so I apologize. Let's see. I feel like I'm leaving something out. How many is it first time to Sunday Assembly? By a show of hands, if you don't mind. Will you give those people a welcome or a high five? Thank you so much for being here. So pleased to have you with us. It's virtual high five for everybody there. We do a little thing called Life Happens, and that's just assemblers sharing some of the things that have happened in their life recently. So this is from Amber. She vacationed with her best friend from high school in Madison, Wisconsin, a lovely community, I must say, and enjoyed the winter for 2 weeks. And they hadn't seen each other for 12 years, and she was able to bring a ukulele home to her BFF in San Diego, and it's going from being a neglected wall decoration to hands that will joyfully strum it. So congratulations, thanks for sharing with us. And welcome back to the warmth. This is Southern California cold. It's been in the 50s, but nothing like Wisconsin. Big shout out to Ara, who they thank her for making the signs for the swap, which we're doing this afternoon. So Ara, where are you? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. She's in the back there with Dan, her paramour. For the first time, all of our adopted cats are getting along with each other. That's fantastic because it's my house. Yes, really the success. We have 4 cats. We had 3, but then the neighbor's cat kept coming over and over and over. So now we have the neighbor's cat, and they're all getting along, finally, kind of. Among an uncertain time in life, last night, I felt normal. A friend brought a movie over to watch, and I ate pizza and enjoyed it. And a love interest came, and I joined us for lunch in a movie. It was really nice. Don't know who that is, but congratulations to you. And if things are feeling normal, that is fantastic. We have Help Happens right now, so if I can have Jen come up and take over here.
Good morning. On April 27th, I Love a Clean San Diego is going to be holding their 17th annual Creek to Bay cleanup event. Last year, they were at over 100 sites throughout the county, picked up over 100,000 pounds of trash. This year, Sunday Assembly San Diego is going to be hosting a cleanup site. We're going to run the site and guide all the volunteers and make that site happen. And our site is going to be the Allied Gardens Community Park and Rec Center. And I'm going to need some volunteers to help us to run the site and also to help us with the cleanup. So if you're interested in helping with that event, there's a sign-up sheet back by the calendars in the back on the community table, and we'd love to have you come out and help us with this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hope to see many of you there. We have a reading today, Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. I believe our reader is the recently transplanted from Wisconsin, Amber.
Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes. Over the prairie and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of all things.
Thank you very much. Today's speaker, Valerie Norton, MD, is a Chief Operations Executive Physician at Scripps Mercy Hospital in Hillcrest. She is a practicing emergency physician and chairs the Scripps System-Wide Pharmacy and Therapeutic Opioid Stewardship Program. She's president of the 32-member physicians group Pacific Emergency Providers and has numerous teaching, research, and voluntary activities to her credit. In her spare time, she plays her violin in string quartets and tries to find the perfect confluence of exercise, food, and sleep. Please welcome Dr. Valerie Norton.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to try using this mic so I can move around a little bit and not always be in your way when you're looking at the slides. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. To be able to contribute to this community that means so much to me is really meaningful. So thank you for inviting me. I could talk all day about this topic, but since we have limited time and we can't spend 15 hours talking about it, I thought I would start by telling you what we're not going to talk about. So we're not going to talk about how did we get into this mess of an opioid crisis. That's a very interesting topic, and there's a great book called Dreamland that I recommend if you want to read about that. And that could be a whole different talk. We're also not going to talk about the politics around the opioid crisis or the socioeconomics about it, or even really the demographics. So what are we going to talk about? I'm hoping we're going to talk about a bunch of practical things. I want to empower all of you with knowledge that you can use in your own lives to protect yourselves and your loved ones, your friends and family, to minimize your risk around opioids and to promote your safety. Has anyone here been touched by the opioid crisis, or do you know someone that's been touched by the opioid crisis? So I'm seeing a number of hands. And I think that a typical story that I often hear when I talk to patients or community groups is I hear about a high school athlete, a very accomplished, promising future, who gets injured and maybe has to have some kind of orthopedic surgery. And after surgery, they get prescribed some narcotic pain medication like Vicodin or Percocet or Norco, and they're still in pain afterwards, and maybe they go back and they get a refill, and the next thing you know, they're using this medication chronically, and they become dependent on it. And at a certain point, their physician says, well, you need to get off this stuff, I can't prescribe it for you anymore. And then they find that they really can't do without it, and so they go asking friends for it, or they look through the medicine cabinets of friends and family and they find it. in pill bottles that have been sitting around that people have forgotten about. And then at a certain point, they discover they can't find any more that way, and they start buying it on the street. And then at a certain point, that becomes too expensive because it might be $40 for just one pill. And then what do? They turn to heroin. So that's the kind of person that this talk is aimed at helping. And so I just want you to kind of have that in your mind. If you know someone like that, my heart goes out to you. So I called this talk, oh, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. I'm going backwards. I call this talk, I Want a New Drug, because it's kind of like we need new drugs, right? We don't want to be dependent on these opioids that we've had for many years. They're great drugs, they do help with pain, but they come with so much baggage. So what is the opioid crisis? What is the burning platform? Well, it's not just addiction and dysfunction and having your life messed up and having side effects. These drugs are killers. People are dying. That's why we're calling it a crisis and an epidemic. Turns out more than 90 Americans are dying every day from an opioid overdose. Usually it's accidental or unintentional. We now have more Americans dying from opioid overdoses than from car accidents. That just passed car accidents in the last 5 years as a leading cause of death in this country. It's now the leading cause of death for people under 50. More than accidents, more than homicides, more than suicides, more than cancer. And it's a uniquely American problem because even though we use 80% of the world's supply of opioids, we only have 5% of the world's population. So that's kind of crazy, right? So somehow we uniquely cause this problem here in this country. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh, well, this is just heroin. These are just heroin addicts that are dying. But that's actually not the case. And this graph shows you that it's actually about 1/3 heroin and about 2/3 everything else, which is all the prescription opioids that many of you might have gotten for minor injuries like Norco and Percocet, long-acting opioids like fentanyl patches and methadone, and other newer things that are coming onto the market like fentanyl and tramadol. And then you might be thinking to yourself, well, okay, but that's still not me. I'm not a heroin addict, but I'm also not a chronic pain patient. And this is probably only happening to people who are chronically on these medications for years and years. Well, it turns out that's not true either. Turns out we're finding out that even short courses of opioids for an acute pain episode, like an acute injury or illness, can create future dependency. So we still have to be worried about it, even in people who are getting brief exposures to opioids. Turns out also that the medical community is implicated in this because we've been way over-prescribing. Turns out 80% of the pills we prescribe go unconsumed by the intended recipient. And so then they sit in the medicine cabinet, and we know that 90% of us don't dispose of our unused medications. Anybody here guilty of that? I'm totally guilty of that, right? I never want to throw anything away. You might need it, right? So, and then we also know that 75% of heroin users were introduced to opioids through prescription narcotics, just like this story I told you about the high school athlete. So this is a big problem in our community, and medical professionals have started saying, we need to do something about this. It's not enough just to say, oh, I'm not going to prescribe as much as I used to. We've got to get out there, and we've got to start educating people and trying to work on this. So I view this as one crisis, but three approaches from a medical professional point of view. The first one is prevention. How do we take opioid-naive patients, meaning you haven't been exposed to opioids either ever or very much, how do we keep you from being at risk in the future, say when you have to get your gallbladder taken out or you break a leg? The second bucket would be compassionate maintenance therapy. What do we do for patients that are already on opioids and depend on them to treat a serious chronic pain, like rheumatoid arthritis, for instance? How do we minimize their risk? How do we keep them safe while still providing them with compassionate therapy? And then the third bucket would be, how do we help people who want to get off opioids? What do we do for the person that comes in saying, I'm addicted to OxyContin, can you please help me get off it? And I've had people come to my emergency department asking me that, and until recently I was sort of like, I don't know, that's not what I do. That's not what I do for a living. Go find an addiction doctor. And then they find out that there really are very few addiction specialists in the community. It's actually very hard to find this kind of treatment. But we're starting to develop these programs, even in emergency departments, because we can see that there's a crying need for it. So let's talk about prevention. Why do we need to worry about brief exposures to opioids, like if you have an operation? Turns out post-operative opioid use is a major contributor to the opioid epidemic in the US. And there's a new study out in 2017 that found that about 6% of patients who get exposed to some opioids like Norco or Percocet after an operation, even a minor operation like carpal tunnel repair, about 6% of those patients will still be using the opioids 3 months later well after they should have recovered completely. And that's compared to less than 1% of controls who weren't exposed to opioids. So we know that this can be a gateway into dependency. And we also know that the risk starts to go up after as little as 3 days of use. So we do need to be educating people and telling them that there's a risk there. And we're starting to think about this like it can be a hospital-acquired condition, just like getting an infection when you go into the hospital. It can be a hospital-acquired condition. I also want to make sure everybody here knows that these are not benign drugs. Even if you don't become dependent, there are all kinds of other side effects and complications you should be aware of. They can cause a lot of nausea and vomiting. They can cause terrible constipation. I've had patients tell me the constipation was worse that I caused by giving them Percocet than the original kidney stone that they came in for. So that can be bad, and it can even be to the point where people have to be hospitalized because their bowels become obstructed. They cause all kinds of wooziness. We get people who come in and fall and break their wrist because they were woozy from the opioids. They can cause hallucinations. Has anyone here ever seen that? That happens to teenagers a lot when they're exposed to them for the first time. And then, of course, there's an increased chance of unintentional overdose if you mix them with other things like alcohol or sedatives. And you might not realize that that's an issue, but it can be. It's also expensive. So this is a slide I showed a medical professional saying, you should prescribe fewer opioids and be judicious because it's costing your hospital money every time someone comes back to the emergency department with constipation, or every time someone is so woozy that you can't send them home after their gallbladder operation the day you thought you could, and they have to stay in the hospital another day. So the average hospital that's using a high opioid prescribing strategy is spending about $1.5 million more a year than hospitals that are using a lower opioid prescribing strategy. So this does actually matter in terms of healthcare costs. So we started an opioid stewardship project at our hospital in response to all of these issues. And the idea was that it was going to be a triple aim project. The triple aim in healthcare is reducing cost while at the same time improving quality and improving the patient experience. And that's like the holy grail, right? Because in healthcare, most of the time those things are opposed to one another. You can get better quality, but only if you spend a lot more money, right? Or you can save money, but it's at the expense of the patient experience. But this one we thought actually was going to be a win-win-win and get us all of those things because we were going to save money by preventing complications. We're going to improve the patient experience by preventing complications and getting people back to their normal functioning faster. And also we're going to have better outcomes, and so it just seems like a really good thing to do. So how do we do this? A lot of it's around education. And so one of the things that we've been doing is resetting expectations around pain. I think in this country we sort of feel like it's our birthright never to have any pain, right? Like we think that it'll just be a completely pain-free experience to get a knee replacement or whatever it might be. And so we're trying to tell people that actually it's good for you to accept some pain. Some pain is normal and expected, and if you can tolerate some pain, you'll recover faster. You'll get back to your regular life faster. You'll be functioning and driving and walking and eating your normal diet faster. And the goal is actually not to eliminate all your pain. The goal is for you to recover quickly, and that means using as little opioid medication as you can tolerate and getting off them as quickly as possible. Doesn't mean you won't need no opioids. You may need some, but the idea is just to minimize it and use it as part of what we call a multimodal pain management technique, where we're using lots of other things to manage your pain and trying to minimize your opioids. We're teaching people that they have a lot of harmful side effects, and we have lots of other options, and we're encouraging, instead of this 1 to 10 pain scale that's been around for 30 years and it's like an albatross around our neck, we're trying to encourage functional goals like, could you get out of bed this morning? Did you walk 50 feet? Did you eat a meal? Okay, now you're ready to go home. That's great. You're not constipated anymore. That's fantastic. So patients sometimes at this point say, well, but the doctor sent me home with this prescription bottle. It's got 30 Percocet and it says I'm supposed to take 2 every 6 hours. Aren't I supposed to follow the doctor's directions? Like, how many pills am I supposed to take? So I want to tell you, here's some knowledge in case you didn't know this. Probably everybody in this room knows this, but I hear this all the time. With opioids, there's no such thing as supposed to. The amount that your doctor is prescribing is an educated guess. We don't really know how many pills each person is going to need. Everybody's different. People recover at different rates. People have different levels of pain after surgery. People have different tolerance for that pain. So it's always to your advantage to minimize the amount of opioids you take. And short-acting opioid pills, like for a brief episode of pain, like Norco or Vicodin or Percocet, they should always be marked on the pill bottle as needed. That means it's up to your judgment. That means you can take half a pill instead of a whole pill. Yes, you're allowed to cut it in half. It means even if it says every 6 hours, if you want to go every 8 hours, that's great. And the idea is to start taking less and less and space them out further and further apart as time goes by so you can get off them. And I'll just mention that some people are on long-acting opioids, like cancer patients might be on a fentanyl patch. That's different. That they've got to have that every 3 days or whatever it is, and you can't just stop that abruptly or they'll go into withdrawal. But for the rest of us who went and got our ankle operated on, you want to get off them as quick as possible. So how many pills do doctors know how to prescribe for various conditions? The answer is, we kind of don't. This is like received wisdom and tradition passed down through the decades from one doctor to another. It's really shocking how little research there is on this. And we're starting to do more because we're recognizing that we need to step up and take more of a role in combating this crisis. And some of the literature that's coming in over the past few years is showing we've been way overprescribing. We've been giving way too many pills, way more than we need to. There was a study in 2017 that found that emergency department patients who had broken a bone, an actual fracture, and got to go home in a cast, so they didn't have to stay in the hospital, they didn't need an operation, but they were going home with a cast on their wrist or their ankle. Turned out when they followed them, on average, they only used 6 opioid pills. How many was I taught to prescribe? 20 to 30 when I was in training. That's what I did for many, many years. So that's why people have so many in their medicine cabinet, right? I'm trying to do the right thing, be compassionate, make sure your pain's controlled. You don't need that many. Then your teenager ends up getting the other 14, right? So, and orthopedic surgeons are like the biggest culprits. It's unbelievable. They do these painful operations, sometimes it takes a long time to recover from. They would typically, they tell me, prescribe 60, 90, 120 Percocet after a major orthopedic operation like a femur fracture repair or a hip replacement. And after a lot of this stuff came out and I started talking around my health system about this, some of the orthopedic surgeons in my system decided to study it, and they did pill counts for the 4 most common operations, which are listed there. So arthroscopy, where you get arthroscopic surgery on your knee, either just for meniscus or cartilage repair, or you get an ACL repair, which is a little bit bigger deal, and then total hip arthroplasty, which is a hip replacement, or total knee replacement, which is the most painful, as everybody knows has ever had a joint replacement. And they looked and saw how many pills their patients used. And you can see them listed there. So meniscus, they used 4 pills. ACL, 18 pills. Hip replacement, 37. Knee replacement, 67. And these are patients that had been given 120 pills, right? So we need to start prescribing less. And patients need to understand that they may not need anywhere near the amount of pills that are in the bottle. So we need some safety strategies, right? So you want to maximize your non-opioid options, which we'll talk about. You want to try to get off opioids within 3 days, which we talked about. You can ask the pharmacist for a partial fill. Someone sends you home with a prescription for 40, you can say to the pharmacist, I only want 20 of these right now, or I only want 10 of these right now, and they'll bank the other ones for you. You can go back and get them later. You have that option. You should keep your pills hidden or locked up so other people can't get into them, and you should dispose of them when you don't need them anymore. What are the alternatives? I'm sure you're all asking at this point. So ibuprofen alone is this fabulous drug. Here's a study showing that most of the bang for the buck with surgery is just from the ibuprofen. This is abdominal surgery and dental surgery. And patients that got the ibuprofen plus oxycodone only got a little incremental bump on how much their pain was controlled. And then you can also see there's an oxycodone alone bar out at the end, barely better than placebo. And this is maybe the most important slide I'm going to show you all day. This is your power. These are over-the-counter medications, ibuprofen and Tylenol. There's a new study out showing that if you take 400 milligrams of ibuprofen, which is like 2 Advils, and 1,000 milligrams of acetaminophen, which is like 2 extra-strength Tylenol, that's actually better for pain control for injuries than Norco or Tylenol number 3, and it's equivalent to Percocet. Mind-blowing, right? Like, we never used to know that, but now I educate patients about that all the time. And patients say, I'm allowed to take those together? The answer is yes, you can take them at the exact same time. They're from different drug families, they're complementary, they work better together than either one alone, and you don't need a prescription. So as long as you don't have a reason why you can't take them, like bleeding ulcers or something like that, this is your most powerful go-to combination. And I'll be happy to take questions afterwards, but I've told it I shouldn't take questions during. So this is a slide that I showed to medical professionals, just showing all the different options we have for preoperative, intraoperative, postoperative pain control. We've got all these cool medication combinations and cocktails we can do, all kinds of opioid sparing infusions you can get during surgery, regional nerve blocks, and this is sort of the wave of the future with operative pain management to minimize opioid use. And then I also think we need to think a lot more about non-pharmacologic options. Medical professionals tend to pay short shrift to this, So you should be your own advocate. But I'm envisioning that maybe our pre-op waiting area and our post-op recovery unit will look like this someday, like a spa-like environment where we have like a blanket warmer for you, and we've got aromatherapy, and a beautiful dog comes around and lets you do pet therapy, and there's a massage therapist that comes and does some healing touch and teaches you how to do breathing exercises, and maybe there's Netflix so you can be distracted. And these are all things that you can do at home in various combinations, right, to help manage your pain. So safe disposal. This is a busy slide I showed to medical professionals, but basically the bottom 3 bullets at the bottom of the slide, there are lots of take-back programs around town. A lot of hospitals have them. Scripps has a take-back kiosk at all its retail pharmacies where you just go out and just pop it in there, like dropping mail in the mailbox. Sheriffs and police offices also have these, and you're allowed to flush opioids. A lot of people don't know that. They don't want you flushing other kinds of medications like antibiotics and steroids because we don't want that in the water supply, but opioids, it's okay because they're in such tiny dilute amounts that it doesn't hurt anything. If you're not comfortable with that, you can mix them with kitty litter or coffee grounds, put them in a baggie, throw them out. That works pretty well. You can mix them like with old food, anything to make them unappetizing. So I want to talk for just a couple of minutes about what we're doing for chronic pain and people who are opioid dependent. This is sort of the bigger bite to chew, right? Prevention's like the low-hanging fruit, and this is harder, but we're starting to get some traction on this as well. What do we do about severe chronic pain? It turns out that a lot of people used to think we needed to have these patients on opioids long-term, and there are newer studies coming out showing that's actually not the case. There's a big new study that just came out in 2018 that showed for patients with severe low back pain, they followed one group for a full year on opioids. They followed another group for a full year on non-opioid multimodal therapy. At the end of the year, the patients on the non-opioid therapy had better quality of life and reported lower pain scores. Truly astonishing. So we're starting to try to get some of these patients off opioids, and that was true for osteoarthritis, by the way, as well. Now, there will be some people who still need opioids, like sickle cell disease, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and they need a safety plan and a pain management plan with their doctor to make sure that they're minimizing opioids to whatever extent they can. And they need to know that they're still at risk for opioid use disorder and dependency. So opioid use disorder is a problematic pattern of opioid use. We used to call it addiction. When people display drug-seeking behavior, or it's messing up your life, you're becoming dysfunctional in some way, you're going to different providers, seeking different ways to get your prescription, you end up with complications from it, and you try to stop, but you can't because you're withdrawing. Those are all signs of an opioid use disorder. So we have safety strategies for all these patients. We want them to minimize their opioid use. Don't mix with alcohol or sedatives like Valium or sleeping pills. That's really, really important. That's how a lot of the accidental overdoses happen. And you want to have naloxone around. If you know someone like this that's chronically on opioids, talk to them about having naloxone or Narcan around. It now comes in a nasal spray. It's really easy for lay people to use. You just squirt it up their nose. Everybody should know about that. If you've got friends or family, you should get your doctor to prescribe some. And then if somebody you know wants to get off opioids, we now have way better ways to do that. There's something called medication-assisted therapy, and we're starting to do that now in my emergency department, which is really cool. This is a way to use a long-acting opioid like methadone, or the newer one is Suboxone. It basically takes away the cravings, doesn't make you feel like you need to go out and use, but it also is very smooth and even, so you don't have those highs that you would get from heroin or a short-acting opioid. Methadone's the traditional agent, but this is sort of a very, very cumbersome drug. You have to go to a clinic, you have to do it every day, it makes it really hard to hold down a job, it takes hours out of your day. Suboxone, the newer agent, can be taken at home. So that's really cool, and often these patients need MAT for years or even for life, and you have to find a special prescriber because you need a special waiver from the DEA. So there's a bridge program called the California Bridge Program that is starting to help hospitals do medication-assisted therapy, and both my hospital, Scripps Mercy, and UCSD both just got a big grant to start doing this in the emergency department and upstairs in the hospital for admitted patients that want to get off opioids. And I just enrolled our first 3 patients this week, so it's really exciting. Yay, yay. So if you know someone who's interested, send them to us, we can help them. And I just wanted to say this is our vision. We want to promote safe and effective opioid prescribing and promote multimodal pain management techniques. We want to prevent new dependencies and addictions in the community. We want to identify the gaps in therapy and help people who need help with chronic opioid use or addiction, and support clinicians so we can all combat the crisis together. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. That was outstanding, Doctor. Thank you so much. Right now, we have an opportunity for those of you we have a youth group. Candelario will take the younger people that like to participate in that. I will tell you soon we'll be talking about, let the parents know we'll be talking about drug addiction. So if that's something you don't want to have your kids hear, that's a good opportunity to get them out of the room. Now we're going to have what we call a breakout session. Normally a breakout session, we ask you to get up and go stand around in small groups, but we're going to do this in our seats. Lynn is going to facilitate that. So Lynn, come on up.
Okay, I developed this next little breakout a couple weeks ago. In the meantime, I have finished reading a book called Unbroken Brain. And one of the important things about that book is that it describes behavior as something we typically learn. So we have some behaviors that are instinctual or reflexive, but most of the behaviors, particularly if we repeat them, are things that we have learned to do. And so now I will go to the slides that I had already prepared. So I'm going to talk about behavior as being on a continuum. At the negative end of that continuum, we have addictions. In the middle, we have habits. And at the other end, we might have what we call thrivings. This is like impossible to read, but this is a page out of a book entitled Sex, Drugs, Gambling, and Chocolate, a workbook for overcoming addictions. It was written by Tom Horvath, who is a local psychologist, who has run addiction service programs, inpatient, outpatient, sober living, for a long, long time. He's up in La Jolla. It's his book, and this page, which you can't read, but there are copies of it back there, starts out with alcohol, wine, cigarettes, cigars, religion, overeating, slot machines, television, videos, food, fortified wine, the lottery, ice cream, dessert, and the list just goes on and on and on. And he's making the point that we can develop an addictive relationship with almost any behavior. So in addition to being learned, all behaviors are associated with both costs and benefits. So when I engage in any behavior, it brings me certain benefits, otherwise I'm not likely to repeatedly do it. But it typically comes with some costs as well. What those costs and benefits are may vary from one behavior to another, and from one person to the other, even if they have the same behavior. So maybe I overeat sweets, and the consequences for me, because I'm a type 2 diabetic, may be different than the person who overeats sweets but has no diabetes in their family. At any rate, every behavior we have, even the ones we don't think about very much, do have both costs and benefits. And any behavior, that's what that prior list sort of shows us, any behavior can actually become maladaptive or problematic when the benefits that we're getting from it are small compared to the costs. And so that often then gets referred to as a maladaptive behavior, where the costs are much, much greater than the benefits. An adaptive behavior is when the benefits are greater than the costs, or at least they're equal. So there it is, kind of in a graphic display. I'm not great with creating slides, that's as good as I could do, but it demonstrates the idea of behaviors being on a continuum, where in the middle, at 0, if you were to add or subtract subtract the benefits from the costs, they're about equal. The benefits equal the costs. If you move in the negative direction, you're moving towards addictive behavior. And on this behavioral continuum, the way we define an addictive behavior or an addiction is that the costs are much greater than the benefits. And so you can see that would be considered a negative behavior, a maladaptive behavior, or potentially an addiction. On this same behavioral continuum, if you move in the positive direction, you may get to a point where you're actually thriving. Some behavior has you thriving, where the costs are very small, but the benefits are huge. And so perhaps for some people, that might be something like long distance running, where they have to get some shoes, they have to put some time into it, but the benefits they derive seem to be huge. But behavior's on a continuum. And that's what I just told you in the middle. Our habits are things where the behaviors and the costs and the benefits are about the same. This just reemphasizes again that any behavior can become maladaptive if the costs are greater than the benefits. And the greater the severity of that discrepancy, when the costs are really, really high and the benefits are low and maybe even disappear over time, then it becomes increasingly harmful. But any given behavior, the costs and benefits can change over time. So for example, all of us, I'm going to assume, like to brush our teeth. We do that anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 times a day. Some people do it after every time they eat. Just imagine for yourself what happens if you don't engage in that behavior. You can't for some reason. You're traveling and you get delayed and delayed and delayed, and you're having meals but you can't brush your teeth. You begin to feel uncomfortable. You want to do it. You might even become preoccupied thinking about it. I cannot wait till I can brush my teeth. That's a good habit. I mean, the benefits exceed the costs of toothbrushing. But imagine if you became obsessive about it and were brushing your teeth 10 or 20 times a day to the point where your gums were bleeding. Now this previously good habit has become something that's maladaptive. So you can think of any behavior along that continuum. If you have an unhelpful habit, getting motivated to change is often hugely difficult. Part of the trick to getting motivated to change is to actually do something called a cost-benefit analysis, where for the behavior that you're thinking, maybe I should change this, you look at all the advantages you're getting from doing the behavior. And even if it's something that you think of as, well, I shouldn't be doing this, there are reasons that you are. Those are the benefits. So you want to look at those and know what they are. You also want to look at whatever the costs are of the behavior. And that's pretty straightforward. That's like pros and cons, right? But you go a step further because you want to look at what are going to be the benefits or advantages of me stopping this behavior. Likewise, what am I going to lose? What's the cost of stopping this behavior? So you really are going to look at 4 different things. And there's a worksheet back there on the community table that helps you walk through this exercise. And you can do it for any behavior, from something small, like I don't want to eat after 6:00 p.m., to something major like, okay, I want to stop spending 4 hours a day on my phone, to I need to stop using heroin. It can be anything from small to large. What I want you to do now is, just with the people sitting around you, talk briefly about whether this has stimulated any thought about some of your own habits and what it would be like to think about the costs and benefits. We'll do that for a few minutes and then we're going to move on.
All right, good people. It is time once again for the inimitable, one and only, Mr. Paul Svensson.
I used to have an addiction to buying guitars. You know, if you ask a guitar player how many guitars do they need, the answer is one more than we have. Right? Guitar players out there? Yes. You know it. Let's try this together. To be humble, to be kind, it is the giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend, to give in such a way that has no end. We are loved, we are one, we are how we treat each other, and the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other. Nothing more. Just leave it on that verse. Let's just start over from the top now that everybody knows how it goes. To be humble, to be kind. It is the giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend. To give in such a way that has no end. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. To be bold, to be brave. It is the thinking that the heart can still be saved. And the darkness can come quick. Dangers in the anger and the hanging on to it. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. Tell me what it is that you see. A world that's filled with endless possibilities. The heroes, they don't look like they used to. Look like you do. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. You sound awesome. Let's sing it again. We are love, we are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more.
That's a lovely song. Gets me right in the feels, Paul. Right in the feels. We ask you to share moments out of your life, personal moments, things that have happened to you or experiences. Some of them are funny. We've had some really great ones. And we've had some heartbreaking ones, but we would ask, personal moments are something that are hard for us to come by, so we do appreciate if you do share stories, and if it's something that you don't think that you can say out loud yourself, and I understand that can be difficult sometimes, I have trouble with it myself sometimes, you can write it down, and someone else will read it for you, and you can even do it anonymously if you like. Today we have a personal moment from Veronica. Veronica, can you come up?
Okay. Hello? Okay. So, what does a heroin user look like? Even for myself, this question conjures up images of an IV user, clearly strung out, dirty, and possibly passing out. Well, this just isn't always the case. You never would have pegged me as someone that a drug-using life would appeal to. I was a goody two-shoes as a child. My biggest fear was disappointing my parents. I was a straight-A student, cheerleader, Girl Scout, and loved Jesus. From the outside, my life looked perfect. At least I tried my best to make it look that way. Looking back, I see some of these as signs of what was to come. You see, I did my best to make everything look perfect because it was actually so far from it. My mom was a raging alcoholic, prone to fits of violence. She never hit me, but I lived in constant fear of what she might do next. My mom counted on me to take care of her, my younger brother, and make it look like we were the perfect all-American family. This is a lot of pressure to put on a child. While doing my best to make everything appear perfect on the outside, I was tormented on the inside. Mental health issues run deep in my family, and I was no exception. I'd say a combination of genetics, my environment, and childhood trauma I do not like to talk about made me an extremely depressed and anxious person. I've been an insomniac and contemplated suicide for as long as I can remember. Growing up Christian, I especially dared not speak of my suicidal thoughts. Having them was a sin, so I prayed every night for the rapture, for Jesus to take me to heaven, but I found no solace in religion. Then as a teen, I discovered drugs and alcohol, and that I could escape for just a little while. I could let go of my worry, my need to control everything, my fear of being less than perfect. I became a partier. I drink to excess. I can see now that this was a problem even then, but I was never an everyday user or addict. I was having fun. Fast forward to my 20s when things got serious. I now have the added trauma of a 2-year abusive relationship and the suicide of my dad when I was 19. I'm miserable. I want to die, but I escape instead. I meet the guy I would be with for the next 7 years, who I'll refer to as the Italian. He introduces me to my first taste of what opiates can do. It starts off with Vicodin and then quickly goes to Percocet because we could snort those. It was a real escape. It took away any anxiety and pain and made me feel like I could do anything. And just like that, I became an everyday user. If the story ended here, I probably wouldn't be up here talking to you. But I had my wisdom teeth pulled when I was in my mid-20s, which got infected. I was in a lot of pain, and the Percocets were doing nothing because I had built a tolerance to them. Not being able to stand seeing me in pain, the Italian brought home my first oxy. He shaved me off 20 milligrams, which I snorted, and I was instantly hooked. I wanted to feel the way that made me feel all the time. I started doing them every day. Before I knew it, I was smoking and snorting 80 milligram pills at once. That is a lot. The image you had in your head earlier of the heroin addict passing out, perhaps with a cigarette in their hand, that was now me. I've got the cigarette burns on my thighs to prove it. But this wasn't heroin. This was prescription medication, OxyContin. I was in it bad. I'd get sick if I didn't use. The Italian and I would substitute Suboxone when we couldn't get Oxy. I tried to quit a few times. I left the Italian several times, but kept running back into myself, into my pain, into my feelings of hopelessness and despair. So I always went back to the Italian and the drugs. By the 4th or 5th year of using, it's hard to keep track. The drug company making Oxy changed the formula so you can no longer smoke or snort their product. So everyone the Italian got our stuff from started using heroin, and the Italian and I started smoking heroin. What's funny to me is that I never got high off of heroin. It just kept me from getting sick. While the name heroin has a really bad image associated with it, Oxy is a much scarier word for me. When the Italian and I finally decided to quit for good, we came out to San Diego. We separated shortly after, but that's not a major part of the story. So I quit opiates. But again, I ran back into myself, my depression, and what I now know to be PTSD. As they say, wherever you go, there you are. I began to binge drink like it was going out of style. I mean, blackout drunk. I didn't actually like the way alcohol made me feel, so I just binged until I blacked out. I was on an intentional path to self-destruction. After one night of binge drinking, it all came to a head. I ended up attempting suicide for the second time in my life, but something happened when I was passing out and thought I was dying. I realized I didn't really want to die. I just didn't want to hurt anymore. Finally, I hit bottom and really had nowhere to go but up. It was either die or really start living. After the mandatory 5150, I joined an IOP, or intensive outpatient program. I finally got my major depressive disorder and PTSD diagnosed and got on the proper medication. I went all in on the therapy too, getting as much out of each group as possible. There was one thing I was missing, though. I was completely against any type of drug rehab program. I was so proud that I quit opiates on my own, and I was determined that I could stop drinking on my own, too. I had been dragged to 12-step meetings before. I knew what they were all about, and they would not work for me. I could never buy into the whole higher power thing. Luckily for me, a very nice man kept politely nudging me to try his class. He kept assuring me this was not like AA and saying, "What do you have to lose? Just come to one class." His persistence was what finally got me to his self-management and recovery training class, or SMART. Boy, was I glad I went to it. It turns out they use science-based therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and rather than having me say I was powerless over the substances, I was encouraged to discover the power of choice. The program helped me figure out why I was using in the first place and gave me tools to help me take control over my addiction. It turns out CBT is really great for MDD and PTSD as well. Now my mental health is my #1 value and priority. That's how it's going to be for the rest of my life, and that's okay. It beats being sick. And though I get depressed and anxious from time to time like anyone, I'm now in a healthy place and equipped to handle those lows. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you for sharing that. Before starting into my MC address today, I will just want to do a couple of disclaimers. One, I will be talking about drug addiction. Two, I will only be speaking for myself. I don't condone drug usage. I'll be speaking about things that I thought at the time that I did use. And also, for those of you that are new, I will let you know the MC address. Generally, I try to inject a little bit of humor, maybe something new, something I find interesting that hopefully you will find interesting to do, or something thought-provoking. This won't be one of those. I was born in 1960, and in the 60s, they had the police would come into your classroom, and they would bring this kit, and they would open it up, and it would be all these pills that were all lined up, and they would be categorized. So there'd be barbiturates and amphetamines, and paint, and glue, and then marijuana. And so they would tell you, you got your barbiturates here, you got your phenobarbital capsules, your yellow jackets, there's your pink ladies, your red birds, your rainbows, and there's your tooties. You got to watch out for those. Over here we got amphetamines, you got your speed, your goofballs, your co-pilots, your brownings, your bennies. There's your cartwheels right there, and there's your Dexies right there. Over here we got marijuana, Mary Jane, grass, pot. Also, this is a double-ended rolled joint. You're going to see a lot of those around, and this is a bomber. Right here we got hashish. That's a heroin. That's a marijuana derivative. And this is an alligator clip. Yang, yang, yang. That's what they use to hold. That's what they do. And the message was drugs are bad. And then they do this incense thing. They'd burn this incense so you know what pot smelled like. So they make us little fifth graders their snitches, I guess is what it would be. Well, fast forward so I was born in 1960, and by the time they got to the 1970s, and I'll be honest with you, drugs were everywhere. You could find anything you wanted anywhere. So me and my friends, we experimented with a lot of things. I will say, I won't go through the list. Heroin and that side I never have tried, but let's say everything else. We started using marijuana. That's the one that I probably used for the longest period of time. And I used that, maybe not the longest period of time, but we did smoke marijuana. I used that probably up till my mid-30s. I don't really remember quitting marijuana. I think by the time I got to my 30s, I just didn't know where to get it anymore. And you know, it's marijuana. It's legal now, so maybe not the same thing. But the one thing they didn't tell us about was alcohol. And when in 1976, I had my 16th birthday, and I got my driver's license on that day, and I began delivering pizzas that night for Vinny's Pizzeria in Chula Vista. The cook, Sean, he showed us how we could take beer and wine out the back of the Vinny's Pizzeria at night, and so I started drinking when I was 16 years old. And then my friends and I, we drank recreationally. We would either get beer and wine from the Vinny's Pizzeria, or on the way down to the beach, we'd stop at Lucy's on Bay Boulevard there, headed towards Imperial Beach, which is still there, by the way. But when you were 17 or 18-year-olds, you could buy wine coolers and they would not question you, and we would drink recreationally. This was through high school, and when I got into college, I was on my own. I was a college commuter. I didn't live on campus, and I was really alone. And I started depending on these drugs a lot more, especially alcohol. Alcohol, pretty much from the age of 18 all the way to 41, I drank every day. I was addicted to liquor. And I won't outline being addicted to liquor. I think it's pretty well documented. I mean, you understand it, most of you, and maybe some of you have been through it yourselves. At this point, I'd just like to do just a quick survey. So for the show of hands, I mean, how many of you know people or have been involved with people that have a drug addiction problem? Okay, and I have two more questions. So I don't want you to raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. Think you're raising your hand in your head, don't do it. Okay? How many of you have been addicted to drugs? And how many of you are addicted now? I drank pretty much straight through for 41 years, but I did stop for 2 years. In 1989, on May 1st, my 21-year-old cousin, Tim, he drunk drove himself and two of his friends into the back of a flatbed truck. It was parked, and he was skirting along the curb, and he was going at a high rate of speed, and he ran right in the truck, and he killed all three of them. I stopped drinking that day, and I was at my grandfather's house, and he was telling us the evils of drinking, and my hands were shaking. I'd become so addicted to liquor that I shook when I didn't drink. I was sick of being sick. I was tired of being tired. I'd wanted to quit for a long time. It seemed like a good day to do it. I weighed 70 pounds more than I do right now. I drank all the time. I would get off work and get a six-pack of beer and drink a beer on the way home, and then when I got home, I'd drink a beer to hide the smell of the beer that I drank on the way home, and I would get peppermint schnapps on my day off, and I would go to the San Diego Zoo with my zoo pass, and I'd drink and see the animals, and I'd be all by myself. I was addicted to liquor, but I took some time off, so it was a good time to stop. It was a terrible time in our lives, but it was a really good time to stop, so I stopped drinking. But along that time, and these are words I never said out loud, so you have to forgive me. To a group of people anyways. One of my friends introduced me to a drug called methamphetamine, crystal methamphetamine, and I liked it. I thought what the police were telling us was not true. My recreational drug use, I found that I really enjoyed it. Crystal methamphetamine works by releasing the neurotransmitter dopamine into your brain in large quantities, and it releases it, and you have this feeling of euphoria, and you're sharp as a tack, and you can get things done, and you don't need sleep. And if you use it again, the dopamine gets depleted, and if you use it again, the dopamine gets depleted. If you use it again, there's no dopamine. There's just being able to maintain. I won't outline over the course of the years, it was almost 3 years that I used, what situations I put myself in with very dangerous people, the places that I went and the things that I did. Everybody has their own level. I always took drugs to maintain. I didn't drink to excess where I blacked out. I didn't get so stoned that I couldn't function. I didn't take methamphetamine other than just to get through my day, but I was addicted. And I don't believe in heaven or hell. That's speaking for myself only, so you'll know I'm using these terms as a descriptor, but I will tell you for sure that methamphetamine is a devil and being addicted is hell. I lied about where I was going, what I was doing, and where my money was going. Still maintaining a job and going through my life. On the outside, you might have thought I was a gregarious person, but I had cut myself off from all my family, my friends, the people that were close to me. I had isolated myself. I don't even remember quitting methamphetamine. I know one day I ran out, and I couldn't get it. And I fell asleep in the morning, and I woke up the next morning, And I went outside and I was so confused because it just didn't seem right. The sky didn't seem right, and there's too many people on the street, and it took me a little while to realize it wasn't morning, it was nighttime. The sun was setting, and I slept through a day and a night and a day, and I was just left being depressed and alone. I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a car, I was broke, I had a place to live, and I had food in the refrigerator, but I didn't have anybody I could call. I had separated myself from everybody that was close to me. I was left with depression, withdrawal, and a mouthful of bad gums heading towards losing all of my teeth, which probably would have happened if I had kept going. I remember quitting liquor very well. I've recounted this story here before, 2001, December 21st. But by this time, I had a child in my life. I wasn't just concerned about myself. I was concerned about somebody else. And that's really, really what helped me anyways, being concerned about somebody else. So I've been off of crystal methamphetamine for decades, liquor for 17 plus years. But I don't want to tell you this story. I was reluctant to tell it because I wouldn't want anybody to think less of me. I don't tell you this story to hold myself up as an example of somebody who's a success, because I wasn't a success, I was a failure. I failed over and over. I failed my friends, I failed my family. But I did want to tell you because for those of you who didn't raise your hand, but raised your hand in your mind, I wanted you to know you're not the only one. You're not alone. There is a world outside, and when you're ready, there is help. Turns out the thing that I wanted most in my life, and people said I self-medicated. I don't know. It's a diagnosis, I guess. I don't understand. There are things in my life that maybe it's another time I'll share, but what I craved more than anything was community, was interaction, was people. And I have a community here. I feel blessed to be in your presence, and I guarantee you it's something I'm never going to give up. I'm also never going to give up caffeine. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. Thank you very much. And now for a moment of silent reflection. This would probably be something for personal moments earlier in the day, but I'm doing something this Thursday I'm really excited about. I was thinking about silence reflecting, where I'm taking 6 hours with some friends, and we're going to a San Luis Rey mission where we're having quiet time. So you just be quiet for 6 hours, totally unplugged, meditate, walk the grounds. Boy, I'm really looking forward to that. I've never done that before. That sounds like heaven, doesn't it? Or whatever, you know. Whatever that would be if there was such a thing. Speaking only for myself. So some announcements. If you're making announcements, you wouldn't mind to come up front. A little housekeeping while people are coming up front. I will let you know that Sunday Assembly is a volunteer organization. To make all this happen and all the events, people are giving their time. We do function principally on recurring donations in any amount. So if you think $2 is too little to give or $5, it's not. We really appreciate it. And it helps us to really know how much money we have. Laura, our treasurer, takes care of the bookkeeping, and we have a full accounting of all our money, and we make sure that we're assiduous in everything, and every penny is accounted for, because we don't know, at some point maybe Sunday Assembly will come under scrutiny by national organizations that wouldn't want Sunday Assembly to be here, and we want to make sure that everything is spot on, and it is. Our first announcement.
Oh, Paul, could you do the slide? Sorry, I abandoned.
Here.
Okay, a week from today, we are having a multi-book, multi-topic discussion. It will happen at the Alamo Mexican Cafe in Old Town, which is right up there. It'll be from 4 to 6. If you go to our meetup for this event, there are lists of books that might be useful for you to look at. The topic is going to be the opioid epidemic and substance-related issues in general. You do not have to have read the book to come. If you want to just come and be part of the conversation or listen, you are welcome.
I'm up here because I totally forgot to ask Brendan to do the crawfish boil announcement. I'm so sorry, Brendan. Brendan's our cook. He has the Cajun lingo down. We had our last crawfish boil last fall, but it had been pushed off, so we're trying to get right back on the late spring schedule when the crawfish, you have a bunch of different choices, and they're smaller, and they're red, and they're cheaper. So we don't have our usual venue, so we're looking for a park, but save the date for 5/4, which is Star Wars Day, because may the 4th be with you. I will be looking for a cheap Darth Vader hat, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But save the date. We'll try and get the details and tickets up on Eventbrite as soon as possible once we have a venue. Thanks. Oh. I'm wrong. Let's go Earth Fair.
All right.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Lewis. Earth Fair this year, 2019, is on April 28th. Earth Fair draws some 60,000 people to Balboa Park every year. Come check it out and stop by our booth. Each year we have some animal fun, and this year we'll be focusing on, we'll spread some awareness on the current issues facing the 3 R's today, and this year, rather than 10 years ago. Things have changed, guys. If you want to hang out at our booth, aka volunteer, come say hi to me. Thanks.
I'll be hosting Sunday Assembly's second rummage sale, Memorial Day. If things you have aren't sparking joy, or you want to downsize, or you just need a little spring cleaning, save them for the rummage sale. It's Sunday Assembly's biggest fundraiser. There are 2 mentions of it here if you forget the date. Also, maybe some of you could volunteer the week of or during the rummage sale. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun.
Thank you. Paul, I think we need a palate cleanser.
Yeah. I think also we need to stand up and sing this one. Just stretch it out. I can see clearly now the rain is gone. Appropriate for San Diego right now, huh? I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Sing that again. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. That's a great place to put a little harmony in. Oh yes, I can make it now. The pain is gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. Here is the rainbow I've been waiting for. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. that I play at other Sunday assemblies from time to time. And this is the best singing Sunday assembly that I have ever encountered. And you guys sound particularly good today. So let's just do this because we're way over time anyway. Who cares? I can see clearly now the rain has gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Here is that rainbow I've been waiting for. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. One more. Oh, it's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Paul. The best part of Sunday Assembly is being able to talk to each other. Our next assembly is April 21st. That happens to be Easter Day. And also, we're starting a new restaurant gathering. So if you want to meet after the event to talk even more, Barrio Star at 270 Fifth Avenue. If you need any help getting there, just let us know. Thank you all very much for being here.